And so, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the homeless verification training. This is a training specifically for documenting for two HUD-funded streams of housing, the HUD COC, Continuum of Care Funds for permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing, and then the HUD ESG, Emergency Solutions Grants Housing. And so they all fall under standards. So when they put out the grants, they require us to follow these federal regulations when we do documentation. So we want to empower you to be able to do documentation for all of our people that are, on the streets or in shelter, fleeing domestic violence. So I'm going to go through that. I'm going to go through 3 different kinds of documentation. They're all very similar, but one of them is just what we call literal, which is streets, shelter, motel voucher, car at night, and fleeing domestic violence. And then the second one is I'm going to show you verification of what we call literal observation of homelessness. And that means that we actually go out to their campsite and take a look at it if it's, a camp or wherever it happens to be outdoors. And then the last one I'm going to do is verification of a motel stay, because this is going to apply to all the different kind of scenarios that you and other providers will experience. So there's some different distinctions, and I'll explain how that works for you guys. I'm going to screen share, make sure that you guys can see this. Can you see that screen now? Okay. Somebody give me a shout out. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So in the email, I'm sort of assuming that you were able to forward this. It looks like everybody's here because of this email, Amanda, right?
Yeah.
So if you do want to go back to your email, there's going to be a few things that you're going to want to be able to access. And to make it simple, you're just going to go to this engagement toolkit link. So you can go back, I can resend it, or I can even tell you what, I'll just put it in the chat right now. Let's see here. So just in case you need it again, that's the engagement toolkit, and you can access that again. So what the engagement toolkit is for, we developed it last year when we had some outreach collaboration, and it kind of gives you this wide array of tools that our system uses for connecting people to our system and all the documentation that we need to do. Provides video for like other types of housing, connection to a housing screening tool for like all the other housing types. So it's very useful. We use it in our VI SPDAT training as well. So it's just an excellent and ever developing tool with lots of stuff in it. So everything that we cover today is going to be in the engagement toolkit. I just recommend that you go ahead and put that in your browser, and that will allow you to get access to this, everything that you'll need for today. So that's kind of the starting place here. So we're going to go ahead and go through these 3 different verification types. One of them is going to be for like kind of the most common scenario that you guys have. Like I did send out in that email a couple actual documents that your staff produced. Amanda produced one, Michelle Curtis, when she was there, produced one. One was for a continuously homeless person, one was for an episodically homeless person. We can't screen share them because that's personal information, but I just wanted you guys to have it, a couple examples of some specific people that got pulled out of your ECW system at First Nations, and could be pulled out of other systems like healthcare, or different organizations may have similar ways to pull out people's experience of homelessness and then translate it into this document that will work to meet HUD standards. So that was the reason behind those 2 documents. So, and then Amanda's going to show you how to pull all that information out of their system, to kind of complete the training. So first of all, we're looking in the engagement toolkit. If you want to get to the information for today, you're going to be looking at this. When you pull up the engagement toolkit link, it looks like this. And under the homeless and disability verification, that red folder, you're going to click on that. And then you're going to be using this homeless verification forms folder that actually has the forms that we're going to use in it. And then there's samples in here of the things that we're going to cover. And specifically, I'm going to use this real colorful one. And we'll pull that up. And so this is just a reference you can always go to in that engagement toolkit. I'm going to kind of cover what to do and what not to do in some detail. And even if you don't absorb it, you can simply just go back. So this document is often used for permanent supportive housing. It could certainly be used for rapid rehousing and transitional housing. So when we're looking at this, HUD just wants specific things in this document. And one of the biggest mistakes is that people just sort of overload it with unnecessary information. So I'm going to try to give you some distinctions about what to put in and what not to put in, and some of the most common mistakes that people have when they're trying to fill this out. So just to kind of do an outline, when you do start filling this out at the top, it's good to have your header. I think you guys already have a document that has your guys' header on it, so we prefer that. And could you share that with everybody, Amanda? I think you have one for sure. And then when you start filling out, of course, you just put the person's name at the top. There's 4 columns, one for date, one for interaction, one for living condition, and then one for further supporting evidence. So I'm going to go through an example, and then I'm just going to recap what we're doing here and then what we're not doing. So when we fill out this documentation, we are either doing it in the last 12 months, which we call continuous homelessness. That's homelessness without any breaks. Or if their homelessness was broken up with like at least week-long breaks or more, then we go back 3 years. So when you get a request from us, we're going to say 12 months or 36 months. And then you begin to just sort of fill this out accordingly. You're going to, like right now, we'd go back to January of 2021 because that's the last 12 months if it was continuous, or we'd go back to January of 2019 if it was episodic. And then you start pulling out an ECW and putting the records in. So once you see all the instances in the last 12 or 36 months, you start filling out this form with it. So first of all, in the date column, you're going to put just the month. You can put specific dates, but it's not really necessary. HUD only cares about blocks of time that are within a month. So they don't really care if it's specific to the date, but it's nice, if you really want to have that specificity. And I did show an example where we're putting, sort of multiple days in there, but, I wouldn't really worry about that too much. Most of, I think what Amanda does is just put the month in, that's completely fine. So I have had documentation come back where there was like going past 3 years back, don't make yourself do extra work. So just be keen to that. The next column is just a description of the interaction. This one is kind of done by what we call a community member, but if it were you guys, you would just be saying something like, came into First Nations for services, and just kind of keep it right at that. Really, it's nice and simple. The next column is living conditions. And so you're putting in never the word homeless. You're always putting in a description of what that homelessness looks like. So I'm going to do a few situations there, like one person was living in a parking lot at night, and we try to give the location if we can. But if we don't have the location, we can just say generally, like they were living outdoors or something like that. That's fine. Living outdoors in Albuquerque is fine. Or some of you guys put they reported that they're living wherever. And because in the top here, it says in your professional judgment, this is where they're at. Because you're kind of making that statement that in your professional judgment, this is where they are. If you believed it to be true, then you can put it in here, whatever the location was that they reported to you if the whole context fit and you believe that was accurate. So there can be things like, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a little bit, motel voucher, There can even be fleeing domestic violence because that is a viable status. So if somebody's fleeing domestic violence, they're eligible in our system, even though they're staying with somebody. And that's the only time that's true. So if you're put that somebody is fleeing domestic violence on some homeless verification, it has to actually be that they're currently fleeing. So you wouldn't, like I put this on the most recent date, just as an example, because they have to be currently fleeing to be eligible. You wouldn't put it historically as valid documentation. It would have to be current. So keep that in mind. And then finally, further supporting evidence are things like they had bedding and belongings. Maybe they didn't have reliable access to food or showers. Maybe they were pushing a shopping cart full of belongings, things like that. So that's kind of a quick overview of what to do. Here's some things that you don't want to do. You don't want to use the word homeless. Like we have this happen a lot. People will submit documentation. They'll say, the person was homeless and came to our church, right here. And we can't use the word homeless. We have to replace homeless with the description of what was going on. So you always use the description. Another very common mistake is that we have people combining multiple months in a row. And HUD wants to kind of account for each month on its own basis. So you don't want to mix up months. They're just trying to show that there was an interaction within each month. And that's why it's important to separate them, because they want to say, okay, somebody actually met with this person within the month. And that's an important requirement. So only put 1 month, like these up here. You could have dates within a month that are the same, but only include the information on 1 month. And then, like I said before, don't go back more than 3 years or 1 year, whatever's being asked of you. Another common problem that I see is a HIPAA violation. Don't be putting in the description that somebody's utilizing like medical health or mental health services, because that's none of anybody's business. So the thing to do is just say that they got services at First Nations. And so that was just a quick way to avoid it. This form doesn't care, and HUD doesn't care about what kind of services were gotten. So just keep it really quick and to the point, just a quick phrase like they just, got services and we talked to them or something like that. So you can avoid that problem. Also, some people go on and on about different kinds of services. Not necessary. It's not going to help us. It's just going to make more work for you. So don't worry about that. Another common problem that we see is that people will come up with interesting descriptions, and they're well-meaning and they really want to help, but they don't actually describe the homelessness. So don't get caught in that trap. Here's one. We get stuff like this you wouldn't believe. Said like, we came up and talked to these people over at the Circle K, and after talking for a few hours, we gave them some blankets and soup, and then we talked to them about other services. We love them so much and they deserve your help. I've worked with them for years. And in there, they never gave any description of where they were staying at night. So don't make that mistake. And not that you guys are pretty dialed in. I think this is kind of more for our community members or other service providers that don't do this very much. But that's kind of a common mistake. A well-meaning statement, but it doesn't actually describe where they're staying at night. Okay, I'm going to go through just a kind of a recap in detail of these columns. So first of all, when we're doing an observation, because you guys are a service provider, it's what I said before, it's what you believe to be true based on the interaction in the data.
This is Melinda.
Hello? Maybe somebody should mute for a second. I think that was unintentional. So service providers can just from an interaction.
Okay, so I'll just let him know it's that roadway and he could just go
If
now.
somebody could mute.
Okay, is that okay?
Merlinda?
Should I just wait till you confirm?
Okay, there we go. I was able to mute her. So because you guys are service providers, you're allowed just based on your interaction to make a statement. Other community members can't do that actually. Like if it was a security guard or it was just somebody living in Albuquerque, they wouldn't be allowed to make a judgment call, but you guys are. So that's kind of a unique privilege that HUD gives you. But community members who can't be friends and family, by the way, can actually observe a camp or someplace not meant to be sleeping in and make note on this document. Like I said, this is for 12 months or 36 months. It could even be for just the current month, of course. That would be more relevant to transitional housing or rapid rehousing. And then just a few quick recaps on the date column. Make sure that you put a separate row for each month. You can use precise dates, but just state it within a month. Don't put other months in the same row. And in the interaction column, be very concise and to the point. You can just say, they're using services here. Again, don't use any HIPAA information, like they're getting mental health services or we were helping them with their addiction or things like that. Like don't disclose that information. I want to slow down just for a second here. Living conditions has a lot of different possibilities. So I want to make sure you know all of those. So you could say things like they're on the streets. You could say they're in an irreparable RV, as opposed to an RV that's fully functioning and has, electricity, sewer, water. Irreparable RVs are places not meant for habitation, according to HUD. If they were in a vehicle at night, they're in a shelter at night, they're in a shed. If they're currently fleeing domestic violence, only currently, that's valid. If they were out late at night with nowhere to go, that's another valid description. If it's they're regularly doing that. So you can use all those kinds of descriptions in that living conditions column. Just be really concise and use just kind of, if you do know the location, Florida and Central Southeast, you can put that in. Again, don't use the word homeless, describe it instead. And just don't put like sensitive information, in there that might not be appropriate for anybody to know but the client. And then finally, further supporting evidence. Again, that's just information about them not having access to showers or food or anything else that sort of supports the point that they're in a place not meant for habitation. And then finally, under contact information, which is right at the bottom here, definitely your name has to be a real signature, can't be just like a printed one, has to be actually written. Put the organization and the role if you can, date, preferably email and phone, and that kind of takes care of it. So pretty simple. Anybody have any questions? Okay. I'm going to go on to another variation of this. It's called the literal observation of homelessness. This is a little bit different because it's doing something similar, but we use this at the very last documentation piece before we send them to a housing project for a housing voucher. And what we're doing here is we actually have, somebody has to actually go out and observe their camp, their car. We kind of, for safety reasons, don't go out to domestic violence, situations, but everything else, we're seeing it. Somebody in a shelter seeing it, somebody's in a, seeing their motel voucher, or whatever. So this is, back to the engagement toolkit, this is right here, it's called literal observation. So sometimes we might ask your staff for something like this, especially if your outreach team saw their camp. It's got all the elements. I won't go through all of them, but I wanted to just kind of point out that it's actually that somebody is seeing their camp or seeing their car. So it actually has to be observed. This is the very last bit of documentation. So this is on top of what we've already been talking about. So just make sure it has all these elements. There's 8 elements in here. So just make sure if you follow this guide, you'll get them all. And it kind of tells you what they are. It's very straightforward. But if anybody sees anything on there they have questions about, we can speak to that. So let me see if I can make that a little bit bigger. Anybody see anything in there that they want to talk about? I think it's pretty straightforward. I haven't had anybody struggle with it too much. So just make sure like this, the language is that, you believe this to be authentic, is you just kind of use that language at the end. So the other type of homeless verification that you use, I actually just got one of these from CARES yesterday, is a verification of motel voucher. You guys give these out. So this is just a quick format. Again, this is over in the samples. There's a motel voucher letter format there. And so you put your header, the date, to whom it may concern, on and on. It's pretty straightforward. You're just putting the dates of stay there, whenever the motel voucher was, whether it's current or they've already gotten it, and then just make sure, sign, contact information, all the elements are here, really basic stuff. So that is pretty much the end of the training, but I want to make sure that there aren't any questions about any part of this process. So number one, can you go find the engagement toolkit? Okay. You can even pass on that engagement toolkit link. You can, again, go find where the engagement toolkit, let me just go back real quick. I'll just go back to where it's at again. So just a quick recap. So you click the link and it looks like this. And again, the red, homeless disability verification. The homeless verification forms are here. And there's PDF versions of them and Microsoft Word versions of them. And then the samples are all in here, including that one that we went through today, and the motel voucher format and the literal observation format. So they're all in that engagement toolkit. So any questions on any part of that process? Exciting stuff. But no, it's super important. And you guys are one of the few agencies that actually have a good record of people and where they've been staying at night. And so you guys have been incredibly helpful. We wish some of the other big organizations did what you guys do. It's really made the difference. You guys have been able to help us house a lot of people because of this.
Kevin, yeah, I had one question.
Yeah.
About the literal observation form.
Mhm.
So when we go visit them, is that like the last element? Is that like when we first met with them, or is it the last time we go visit them before they get their voucher?
Right. So when we submit a referral to one of our grant holding agencies, they have to show that somebody observed this person's homelessness within 14 days of them verifying eligibility and issuing a voucher. And so we have to kind of get it really close to the referral date so that they can meet the HUD regulations. So that is, one of your staff or our staff does it a lot too. We go out and then actually literally observe it. Or if somebody's in a shelter, then, we can get a letter from the shelter staff or use our HMIS records for that one. But yeah, somebody has to go out and see the person as this very last step, usually within a few days of the referral or the same day.
Thank you.
Yep, for sure. Any other questions? Okay. We really appreciate you guys. And of course, reach out if you have any questions on any of this stuff. Amanda will give you guys that first part in ECW where you can go get the collection of all the different places where in the system somebody entered their status. Now, I wanted to point out one thing because this is really important, and this has happened several times. There's times where, for whatever reason, somebody comes in for services, and I've noticed, I've been over to your place several times, and you got a really good system where somebody takes down where they're currently staying, right outside usually. But there's been a few times where somebody got missed and somebody came in for services. And if any of you all knew that they were engaging in services and it was known that they were on the streets or in shelter, you can capture anything, whether it's even in the records or if it's just knowledge. If you're pretty clear that that was the date, it's absolutely fine to add that into the documentation, because we want to capture everything. Every month matters. So if that ever happens, it's completely fine just to go off of your memory, or if you know another staff person that knew about another date, that's completely fine. Because you got different locations, different entrance points to your properties, so that can happen. So if it does, just kind of try your best to chase it down, and maybe kind of ask in the ECW. You can see whatever providers they saw. You might just kind of check with the providers and see if there's any other observations, and you can add them all in just to be thorough. That's super helpful. Sometimes just one more month makes the difference in us being able to house them. All right, any last questions? Okay, very good. I will try to put this recording hopefully on YouTube or something quite accessible, and then we'll use it not only for your staff, make sure and get you a copy, but with other staff too. I'm going to show you where I'm going to put the link real quick, actually. That way you can find it in this homeless verification. When you go to that sample letter, one way that it'll be there is there's this video link right here in the document. So I'll put it there, and then of course, standalone link to it. And that way you can go to it at any time, share it with your staff. Okay, thank you guys so much.
I just want to say that I'm gonna schedule it at a later time for you guys. So how to get that information from ECW. So I'll get with you guys later so we can go for very informal. Maybe even just do it in a conference room or something. I'll let you guys know. Cool.
Okay, unless you guys have any other last questions, we'll sign off. Okay.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right. Yep. Thank you, guys. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Here, bye.